Good morning. So, time to start the fifth lecture of the main course by Akihiro Munemasa.
Yeah, thank you for coming to my fifth lecture. So this fifth lecture consists of a very basic part of the representational theory of finite groups, although I didn't formally introduce representation of finite groups from the beginning. But the main purpose of this fifth lecture is to derive a formula for the normalized character which appeared in the Levin's talk on normal behavior graph. So let us review what we had. But in this fifth lecture, the whole purpose is to talk about the center of the group algebra, and which can be thought of the Schur ring, and already Michi talked about Schur ring and also center of the group algebra. So there will be quite significant overlap. It looks slightly different because I use matrices instead of abstract group algebra. So we introduced the commutative association scheme, and fundamental example come from a transit permutation group. So, well, I don't recall the axiom of commutative association scheme. It is an association scheme, just like it behaves like a centralized algebra of a permutation group. And we require commutativity. Then there are two bases of this adjacency algebra. One is, of course, the adjacency matrices, and the other are called the primitive idempotent. And then there are two base change matrices, P and Q, which are just inverse to each other up to scalar multiple. And there is a formula which relates the entries of P and Q. Of course, they are inverse to each other essentially, so you can have a formula for the entry of the inverse matrix, but there is a simpler formula which relates ij entry of P, PQ, and P and ji entry of Q. And then there are two more parameters. One is the structure constant, and the other called Klein parameter. It looks like I'm missing scalar here. I have to divide it by the size of the set on which the association scheme is defined. Sorry, I will correct it later. But that's not so essential. So one obvious permutation representation of a finite group is regular representation. Now, the regular representation doesn't give commutative association scheme unless the group is abelian. But we already investigated its centralized algebra. Centralized algebra turns out to be exactly the left regular representation. And so this gives rise to two isomorphic commuting copies of the group algebra inside the full matrix algebra of size the order of G. So let us recall the definition of the right regular representation. I always denote by PG the permutation matrix associated to action. Usually I consider fixed action, so the definition of PG is understood by the context, because I only consider one action. So in this case, it is the right regular action. That is, that the group element G is multiplied from an element alpha of the set, but in this case, the set is just G itself. So alpha, instead of writing alpha to the power G, I just write alpha times G. That's how G acts from the right on itself. And the left regular representation is that we let G act on the left, but to make it right action, I need to put inverse. So the LG is the permutation matrix associated with the left regular representation. It turns out that these are precisely the adjacency matrices of the centralized algebra. And they behave nicely with respect to the product of the group. So assigning these permutation, either of these permutation metrics is a homomorphism from the group G to the general linear group. And they commute each other because of the associativity of the model. Yes. Now, I want to combine these two to create a new permutation group. That is G times G acting on right and left. So to create action, I have to define a homomorphism from this group G times G to the symmetric group on G by the G on the left acts as G comma H, G comma H to G inverse alpha H, and alpha is an element of G, and also, this is G comma H. So I have two copies of G, so the domain should be the product of two copies of G, so G comma H is mapped to the permutation which sends alpha to G inverse alpha H. In terms of metrics, it is just same as same as the product of LG here and PH. This is a matrix. In fact, it is a general linear group which is indexed by the group element G. It doesn't matter which I write. LG PH is same as PH LG. So this is the action of G times G on G itself. So what are the two orbits of this action? Well, it turns out that the two orbits are precisely the edge set in a normal KD graph. Sorry, I don't also have to correct this G to G comma H. So what are the two orbits? The set of two orbits is denoted by the set squared divided by the group on which it acts. So this is the set of G orbits. As usual, it is denoted by script R. So suppose you take two orbits, and suppose you have elements, one alpha, one beta, that is left component is both identity. Then it means that there exists an element G which maps this pair to the other pair. Yeah, but the action has to be, well, in fact, it's not the G, but it's both can act, but it has to preserve identity. So the pair you take must consist of same element, not GH, but GG. But then the left action and right action combined sends alpha to beta. So this they belong to the same two orbits, if and only if alpha and beta are conjugate. So this relation is called the conjugacy, and it is equivalence relation. I mean, if you define alpha beta to be conjugate, if this condition is satisfied, this decomposes G into equivalence class. Equivalence classes called conjugacy classes. So I denote C0, C1 up to CD, the conjugacy class of G, and of course the identity is a single-zone conjugacy class. And then I can describe the two orbits of this two-sided action, because the two orbits consist of those pair alpha beta such that the alpha inverse beta belongs to some conjugacy class. Well, it may not be immediately clear from this description, but this alpha beta is like alpha is 1 in this case. But then beta has to be, and alpha is identity, then so this alpha, alpha is identity, then so these two are in the same orbit if and only if this alpha inverse beta is in a fixed conjugacy class. So if you can translate this relation in terms of conjugacy class. But then you can move this beta, we can move this alpha to this side, so beta belongs to Ci times alpha. So beta is some, beta belongs to alpha times Ci. So instead, so if you take G from the conjugacy class Ci, then beta can be written as alpha times alpha G. Yeah, so this is exactly how the edges are defined in the Cayley graph. So the edge set in the Cayley graph is alpha, comma, alpha G, where G is the set specified to define the edge set of the Cayley graph. So from this description, I can immediately find the adjacency matrices, because the relations are indexed by conjugacy class. So what are the adjacency matrices? If I fix I, then this is the relation. But the relation, this relation exactly is of the form of permutation matrix. Alpha, comma, alpha G is precisely the position of 1 in the permutation matrix PG. Because PG alpha beta entry is 1 if and only if beta is equal to alpha G. So this is precisely the support of the permutation matrix. So you just collect those supports. That means you just take the sum of permutation matrix, and that gives the adjacency matrix of the ith relation, which corresponds to the ith conjugacy class. So for this conjugacy action, the adjacency matrix can also be described by the permutation matrices. That is not clear in the general case. So we know the centralized algebra. Centralized algebra are just the span of the adjacency matrices, but each adjacency matrix is a sum of permutation matrices over conjugacy class. Now, this is precisely the center of the group algebra. Let's see why. It is immediate from the so-called double centralizer theorem. We know how to take this centralizer of a given star algebra, and we also know that if you take the centralizer twice, you get the same thing back. So, and also we know this left regular representation is the centralizer of the right regular representation we started with. So by the double centralizer algebra, you can reverse that relation to get the original right regular representation is the centralizer of its centralizer, which is the left regular representation. So what does it mean? A belongs to the center of the group algebra. So this by this group algebra, I mean this algebra. So it has to be in this algebra to begin with, but it has to centralize every element in this algebra. That is the definition of the center. Center means that you have to be in that algebra, but also it has to commute with everything in that algebra. But then we know that it is the centralizer of these is precisely this one. Yeah, so that's what it's written here. So it must centralize LG. But then it means that it centralizes both LG and PG. But the action I just defined consists of these matrices. So the center must commute both actions. But that is precisely the centralizer of this action, which is precisely this algebra. So the center group algebra is nothing but the centralizer of this two-sided action. So the center of the group algebra can be thought of a commutative adjacency algebra, our commutative association here. But we already know the abstract structure or block diagonalization of the group algebra. It consists of two matrix algebra of sign, say, and mi, repeated mi times. And from this, it is easy to see what the center is, because the matrices which commute with every other matrix in the algebra is just a scalar matrix. So the center of this algebra, it's enough to consider center of each block, but then each block is a repetition of full matrix algebra, so the center of that is just a scalar matrix repeated mi times, but that means you have a scalar matrix of size mi squared appearing in the ith block. So these are precisely, well, this is just the full description of the center, but this is just a linear combination of 0, 1 matrices, and they form the basis of the center, and that they are called the primitive idempotents. So we immediately know the primitive idempotents, those are the second basis of the adjacency algebra. So we should be able to express the adjacency algebra in adjacency matrices in terms of primitive idempotents, and conversely primitive idempotents in terms of adjacency matrices. Okay, so that's what we do at the end of this slide. So we have a commutative association scheme with adjacency matrices, which are just like this, the sum of the permutation matrices over conjugacy class. And they form a basis, but we have another basis consists of primitive idempotents, which are just a diagonal 0, 1 matrix, but of course we need some transformation, that is, you sandwich this 0, 1 matrix by the unitary matrix that was used to block diagonal of the matrix algebra, the group algebra. So the adjacency algebra are also diagonalized, in this case not the block diagonal, but they are diagonalized by the same matrix U. And the way I define the scalars Pij was that when I want to express A sub j in terms of the primitive idempotence Ei, then the coefficient is defined to be Pij. So, but they are both diagonal matrices after sandwiching by U and U star. So these Pij are nothing but the diagonal entries of Aj after diagonalization. So Pij appears exactly on the diagonal. Now, how do we find these Pij? well, from this information, we know before diagonalizing, they are sum of permutation matrices. So, and if I diagonalize, then it becomes a scalar matrix on each block. So how do we relate these scalars with these permutation matrices? That's what I'm going to do next. Well, from part 3, we knew that the structure of the group algebra, but then it gives a representation. We defined what I mean by representation of algebra, and the only representation I consider is just take block diagonalization and take or extract a particular block. So for each then for each block, I get a representation that is the group algebra or homomorphism from group algebra to this block. Well, I ignore this repetition. You just take a single block because the blocks are all the same. And then this is an irreducible representation of the group algebra. And the group sits inside the group algebra. If you restrict this to the group, you get a representation of the group G. So the group G is mapped to invertible matrices. So we can get the representation of group G, whose image is in the general linear group. Now, here's a definition of an irreducible character. So whenever I have an irreducible representation of a finite group, it assigns a matrix to each group element. Instead of considering matrix, I consider its trace. So trace is a number, not a matrix. Because this representation is obtained by restricting this representation, so the image is really this the ith block of this permutation matrix after block diagonalization. So this is called the irreducible character of the group G. In particular, if you take the identity element, if I take identity element, of course, under the representation, it gets mapped to the identity matrix. And what is the trace of the identity matrix? It's just a size. Size is mi. So for the identity matrix, the character is just the size of the matrix or the dimension of the matrix representation. So these are the basic terminology in the characters of finite groups. It's very easy to see that the character is a so-called class function. That is, its value depends only on the conjugacy class, not in individual element. This is just quite obvious if you know the standard property of the trace. Because if you take two elements in the same conjugacy class, then there exists some element H, which transforms one to the other, and then we compute the trace of G1, or character of G1, which is trace of the representation. But the representation is a homomorphism, so you can split this representation into 3 parts. And inside the trace, matrix is commuted, so you can cancel this and that to get just G2. So the character depends only on the conjugacy class in which the group element depends. Now we are ready to find the entry of the eigenmatrix, that is the base change matrix, which transforms the adjacency matrix to primitive idempotence. So adjacency matrix is diagonalized after using this unitary matrix, the scalars are called Pij. So we want to find this Pij. It's repeated mi squared times on the diagonal. Now, delta I was not only the representation of the group, but it was a representation of this entire algebra. And so delta I has the effect of extracting the single block, ith block. Ith block, not the ith block, but not the ith block is actually the repetition of mi times of a full matrix algebra. So this extracting ith block means extracting one of the mi identical block. So the size is not mi squared, but mi. The same block of mi is repeated mi times. So this is what exactly the delta I means. So I think I should have mi instead. So I think I should have mi instead. So if you take the trace of this is a scalar matrix with a scalar Pij. So this mi, I should have this mi times this scalar is the trace of this matrix. But this Aj is the sum of the permutation matrices over the jth conjugacy class. But this representation and trace are both linear, and if you restrict the representation to the permutation matrix, which is just considered to be the element of the group algebra, you get this Pi, and this trace of Pi is nothing but the character Chi. So you are really summing character of group element over the conjugacy class Cj. But we have seen that this value of the character depends only on the conjugacy class, so they are all the same. So the same value repeated this number of times. Well, then I have to specify what element. I just take an arbitrary element, g sub j from the conjugacy, jth conjugacy class, and so this value is that character value at jth conjugacy class. So I was able to relate this entry of the eigenmatrix Pij with the character value chi Gj. Okay. Sorry for the use of notation. I should have just chi I1 instead of mi or ny. That is the dimension of the representation. So you can solve for Pij. Pij is just Cj, size of Cj times the value of the character divided by ni, sorry, that should have been mi. Where does it come from? That is the dimension of the representation, and the dimension of the representation is nothing but the value of the character at the identity, because that was the trace of the identity matrix. So this is what I get as the entry of the eigenmatrix. Well, it's not immediately clear whether this could be an integer or more generally algebraic integer, because you have a denominator which is in general not 1. This is a dimension of an irreducible representation, and typically it is not 1. And of course, this Cj, size of Cj is nothing to do with the dimension. So it is not so clear whether this could be an integer or algebraic integer, but it is, if you look at the left-hand side, Pij, then it is clear this is an algebraic integer. Algebraic integer means it is a root of a monic polynomial with integer coefficients. For example, the proper fraction like 1/2 is not an algebraic integer, but the square root of 2 is an algebraic integer. Now, the reason why it is an algebraic integer is that because it is the eigenvalue of the adjacency matrix. This is the adjacency matrix. They are Pij are nothing but the diagonal entries of its diagonal form, so they are nothing but the eigenvalue of the adjacency matrix. And adjacency matrix is a 0-1 matrix, so its characteristic polynomial is a monic polynomial with integer coefficients. So the eigenvalues are indeed algebraic integer. So left hand side, this is indeed algebraic integer. So if luckily this is a rational number, then it must be an integer. And this technique is used by Daniela Revin's talk to show that some KV graph has integral spectrum. Okay. Now, I mentioned that there's one particular primitive idempotent that exists in all association scheme, that is the O1 matrix. O1 matrix has rank 1, so it is necessarily a primitive idempotent. So in our regular representation, or maybe even true for the two-sided one, the set on which the group acts is the group G itself. So this is our primitive idempotent. And then this associated to the primitive idempotent, I have the eigenvalue of the adjacency matrix. But what is the eigenvalue? Eigenvalue can be seen by multiplying the adjacency matrix with the corresponding idempotent, then you get that scalar. But the AJ was again the sum of permutation matrices. And E0 is the O1 matrix divided by the scalar. But what happens if you multiply a permutation matrix with O1 matrix? The effect of multiplying a matrix with O1 matrix is nothing but taking the row sum, but the permutation matrix has exactly one at every row, so this Pj times j is just j itself. So you are summing j over the conjugacy class, so that they are all the same, so you have this many j's. And the j divided by the size of g is 0, so you get this one. So comparing these two, this P0j, this one of the entry of the eigenmatrix, turns out to be the size of the conjugacy class. Okay, so that's yeah. So correspondingly, the irreducible character corresponding to this primitive idempotent is called the trivial character. Well, trivial character because its value at any element is 1. Because we have the relation that this character, the relation between the eigenmatrix and character, if you reverse that relation, then you get just a P0j and size of Pj cancelled out, and the chi zero of identity is 1. So this is called the trivial character, which exists in all groups. So we are now ready to discuss the character table of a group. Character table of a group is just a square matrix which tabulates all possible values of characters. We have a conjugacy class, and well, I didn't say how many irreducible characters you have, but certainly in the decomposition of the group algebra, because it is a commutative algebra, we have the same number of idempotents as the adjacency matrices. The number of adjacency matrices are same as the number of conjugacy classes. So we have the same number of irreducible characters. I didn't prove there are no other irreducible character in the abstract setting, but it can be proved that the G has no other representation, no other irreducible representation, so there are no other irreducible characters. So the character table is a square matrix which tabulates all values of the irreducible character in a way that, in such a way that the ij entry gives the value of the ith character evaluated at the jth conjugacy class. So that's the definition of a character table, and because of the formula we established, the character table is essentially the same as the eigenmatrix up to some normalization scalars, because this formula relates the entry of the eigenmatrix with the value of the characters. So there are some normalization scalars, but this scalar depends only on the position ij, where this I comes here. The I corresponds to the row index, j corresponds to the column index. So they differ only by multiplication of diagonal matrices from left and right. So here I have I highlight 1 on the left, on the denominator, so I have to multiply t from the left by this diagonal matrix inverse, and t by right by this diagonal matrix from the right to get the eigenmatrix t. So this is why the first eigenmatrix P is sometimes called the character table of a commutative association scheme. So the eigenmatrix, which was introduced as a change of basis matrix, is a kind of generalization of a character table. The only difference is that we don't consider the group element individually, rather we consider the conjugacy class and center of the group algebra. So that caused a slight difference between those values, but they are not essential. Okay. But then there is another matrix associated to the association scheme, that is the second eigenmatrix. The second eigenmatrix is used to express primitive idempotence in terms of adjacency matrix. Well, so essentially it is the inverse of the first eigenmatrix P, but there is a formula which gives the second eigenmatrix in terms of first eigenmatrix, that is this one. We already have a formula for the Pij, or here we need Pj bar, so we can write this in this way, and you get some cancellation, and it turns out that this is nothing but the, oh, sorry, I think I forgot the bar here. So this is nothing but the bar of the character value multiplied by its degree. So this is the value of the second eigenmatrix. But what is the purpose of the second eigenmatrix? The second eigenmatrix is used to write the primitive idempotence in terms of adjacency matrix. Yeah, so this is what we have. These coefficients are precisely these Qij. But we have established the formula for Qij, so we can just substitute that formula. Sorry if I need bar here. But so we can explicitly write the primitive idempotence in terms of adjacency matrix. And that's what we have. But we already know the adjacency matrix is a sum of permutation matrix over the complex, over the conjugacy class, so I have this. But then, you see that I use the fact that the character value depends only on the conjugacy class. So this sum over all group is same as decomposing this sum into each conjugacy class, and because this depends only on the conjugacy class, I can just regroup the permutation matrices over the conjugacy class. So so this double sum can be combined into the single sum over all group elements. So this is the formula for the primitive idempotence. In other words, this is a well-known formula which gives the central primitive idempotent of the group algebra in terms of the basis of the group algebra, which are just the group elements. At the end of the previous lecture, I showed you that the abstract structure of the group algebra is already revealed by Molian. But to get abstract structure, you have to find explicitly how you decompose the group algebra. And this is how you decompose the group algebra. This particular element expressed in terms of the basis of the group algebra is the primitive idempotence or central primitive idempotence. So this is a single generator of the two-sided ideal of the group algebra. And I will use this formula to decompose a more general permutation representation. Okay, so this is the last slide. So let me review what I did in this 5th lecture. So if I have a finite group, I can consider the group algebra, and the center of the group algebra can be considered as the commutative adjacency algebra of the commutative group if I not only consider the right action but also left action. But then in this association scheme I have the eigenmatrix. On the other hand, the general representation theory, or for those of you who are not familiar with the association scheme, but who know something about finite groups and representation theory, the character table is a very familiar object. And what I showed you here was that the character table is essentially the same as this eigenmatrix after some simple normalization. Okay. In the next lecture, I will generalize this correspondence to, well, on the left side, I have a commutative adjacency algebra. I can get commutative adjacency algebra whenever I have a multiplicity-free finite group action. So not arbitrary finite group action, I mean transitive action gives rise to a commutative one. I need to assume multiplicity freeness to get a commutative one. But then I have an eigenmatrix. Then what is the relation between something which I didn't describe here? Well, this is not the character table. It is some kind of numbers which should be obtainable from the permutation representation without talking about association. This should be known to representation theorists who doesn't do anything, any work on association scheme. So that is, in the theory of Lie group, this is called a spherical function. And so I will explain what these are by setting myself in a more general situation where I don't assume multiplicity freeness. Excuse me. I only consider transitive finite. I generally consider transitive finite group action without assuming multiplicity then in general, what I get is a not necessarily commutative association scheme. So this adjacency algebra is not necessarily commutative. But then I don't have an eigenmatrix. I do have central primitive idempotence and adjacency matrices. Adjacency matrices are certainly basis of the algebra, but the central primitive idempotence are basis of only of the center, not the entire algebra. But still, the center is a part of the adjacency algebra, so it should be possible to express the central primitive idempotent in terms of the adjacency algebra. So that's a kind of some specialization or generalization of the eigenmatrix. And that formula can be derived as using the theory of spherical function, which fills this upper right corner. And that formula is due to the famous representation theorist Charles Curtis and Timothy Foster from 1969. So that will be the topic of the next lecture. Thank you for your time.
Do there be any questions at this stage? If not, then we have a break and resume as 11 o'clock.
Thank you.